Hello and welcome to this OK Commit team training. This is Ben Sands, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to run a great commitment meeting. As you know, OK Commit is all about instilling the 4 drivers of high performance in your team and across your organization. By this point in the process, you should be clear and engaged around a team OKR, a specific objective and set of key results that you and your team will achieve between now and the end of the quarter. In this video, you're going to learn how to run great commitment meetings and instill the second 2 drivers of high performance, consistent action and accountability across your team. But before we get into the details about what a great commitment meeting is and how to run one, I want to share a story about another team who was able to leverage the principles of consistent action and accountability in order to achieve extraordinary outcomes, not just for their team, but for their country as well. Now, instead of me telling the story secondhand, I want you to hear it from somebody who was there. Let me turn things over to Ben Hunt Davis, the captain of the 1980 British men's Olympic rowing team. In this video, an excerpt from a presentation that Hunt Davis gave, he talks about the unexpected, yet purely intentional way his boat went from worst to first in just 2 short years.
To give you some background, I was in the national rowing team for 9 years. I competed at 3 Olympic Games and 6 World Championships. At 10:30 on the 24th September 2000, I was sitting in a boat on the start line of the Olympic Games.
Get 3 in a row.
When people talk about sport or watch sport, very often the temptation is to think that it's all about getting it right on the day, doing the right thing on the day and getting the result. In a way, it's very similar to businesses. When you audit an organisation, it's not what happens on that day, it's what happens leading up to it.
Looking though, across the line, a phenomenal.
I mean, we hadn't chosen to row with each other, we hadn't chosen each other as friends. There was only really one area where we wanted the same thing, and that was in this race.
250 metres gone, and the British have really taken the bit between their teeth.
We realised that if we continue to do what we'd done for the previous however many years, we would continue to get the same result. The same, do what you've always done and you'll get the same thing. And we were desperate to get a different result.
They really don't waste anything at the front end of the stroke.
So we could do the same thing, get the same result, or we could just jack it in. We could just go, you know what, maybe we're just not good enough. Or we had a third choice. Third choice to do something different, something very, very different, to make a jump, take a jump, and start looking at things in a really, really different way.
Bond between these guys. They really have risen to the occasion in this Olympics.
We had one very, very simple question that we were always asking ourselves and each other before we did any training session, before we did pretty well anything. And that very simple question was, will it make the boat go faster?
There the boys there. Let's go down the boat.
Will it be before we sat on the rowing machine for 70 minutes? Will it make the boat go faster? Unfortunately, yes, so that's what we would do.
That good technique all the way through the race.
Before going out to the pub, will it make the boat go faster? Unfortunately, no, so we didn't.
And Croatia have taken it on, but Great Britain, gosh, they look strong.
Today is going to be a good day, because I am going to make it a good day. No one else had helped us along the way. It was only happening because we were making it happen. And if ever it was true, it's going to be on this test day for us.
We're coming through 500 metres, and look at that.
Did any of you pick up on what the commentators were saying about us? About our chances, our hopes?
I'm not sure they can still win. They need more.
They hadn't really looked at what we were doing for the 2 years leading up to that race. They were judging us on the 7 years of previous results. How many of you remember watching the 1980 Olympic Games? Seb Coe, Daley Thompson, Alan Wells, Duncan Goodhue. Quite a few of you. I remember watching that as an 8-year-old going, wouldn't that be amazing to do? But also thinking, that only happens to other people. There's no way I could do that.
250 metres remaining, and the boys are doing so well.
We weren't in the situation of having best people like you are. Well, what's a firm like yours capable of?
But we're going to do it! We're going to hold on!
Just going through loads and loads of learns and wins and, increasing it, we managed to do something different.
Go boys! Here come the Australians!
And as we got given these, the feeling was... Does anyone want to have a look?
Goal for Great Britain! Olympic champions!
As you look at it, think about how good will it feel to achieve your goals, whatever your goals are. As you hold it in your hand, think about, doing all these jumps. How good will it feel when you've got your equivalent in your hand? Because that's what drove us forward. Knowing how bitter it was going to taste if we weren't willing to change, if we weren't willing to make that jump. And I tell you what, making the jump, every single second of the training was worthwhile.
So there you have it. A simple question. Will it make the boat go faster? Whether they knew it or not, the British team was using this simple mantra to help them overcome what we call the success paradox. And here's how this works and maps back to what we're going to do in terms of running a great commitment meeting. So the success paradox says this, that when we are focused, when we are crystal clear on what we're trying to achieve, we, like that British men's rowing team, will achieve success. But here's where things get tricky. Because once we've achieved success as a team or as an organization, well, now success is going to breed new options, new opportunities to try to repeat that success in other domains. Now, typically options are a good thing, right? We all want more options, except when so many options lead to distraction, when we lose sight or touch with what matters most. And when we get into a state of distraction, this is where the whirlwind thrives. And unfortunately, it inevitably leads to failure. So this success paradox is real. And the British men's team overcame it through that simple mantra. Will it make the boat go faster? We're going to achieve and sustain similar focus through our commitment meetings. Simply put, commitment meetings are short weekly meetings during which each team member will make a personal commitment to take action to help the team achieve its OKRs. With one last nod to that British men's rowing team, these personal commitments are essentially each team member saying, this is what I will do to help our boat go faster. This video is all about how to make these meetings as impactful as possible. Specifically, in this training, you're going to learn how to structure and run a great meeting. In addition, you're going to discover the simple question that will ensure that you and your team make commitments that matter, high impact commitments, as I like to call them. Third, you're going to experience radically candid accountability and explore why this unique approach to feedback matters so much to your success. And then finally, you're going to make your first commitments to your team. Together, as a group, you are going to go through the process of identifying and setting very first commitments. Now, like previous training videos, throughout the program, you're going to see this symbol. It's a signal to stop the video and discuss the question or perform the action as a team. All right, let's get started. Now, you know what a commitment meeting is at a high level. Now let's take a closer look at the structure of a great session. Specifically, what does an agenda look like? A commitment meeting has a very simple three-part agenda. First, you're going to review last week. This is the what happened part of the program. Each team member is going to report on the commitments that he or she made the prior week. Did she hit them or did she not? Now, we want to keep this part of the agenda very efficient. Maximum 2 to 4 minutes per person. This section of the agenda should be less than 50% of the total meeting time. Once everyone's had a chance to report out, now it's time to review and reflect. We're going to ask whether or not our commitments, the actions that we took, actually moved the numbers. And what are we learning about what's working and what's not? This part of the commitment meeting agenda is so important because this is where the magic happens. This is when we learn and then use that learning to then make better commitments in the weeks to come. And that's the third part of the agenda, the plan for this week. Based upon this review and reflection, each team member will then make new commitments for the upcoming week. Now, the length of a commitment meeting really depends on the number of people in the meeting. But ideally, these commitment meetings will be concluded within 20 to 30 minutes. We want them to be incredibly efficient, and we'll talk more about how to create that efficiency when we review a few more best practices in running these meetings. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit more about what commitments are. There are three types of commitments. And I want to break them down in detail and provide a few examples so that you really understand what a good commitment looks like. So the first type of commitment is an action. This is just the commitment to complete a specific task or leveraged behavior. And by leveraged behavior, it means an activity that will make other activities easier or unnecessary. Here are a few examples of good action commitments. 1, conduct a key account review with my manager and develop a plan to support at-risk relationships. 2, create a draft of a customer satisfaction survey and get feedback from customer service and marketing vice presidents. 3, work with Jeff and Julie for 20 minutes on improving their upselling scripts for a new premium product offer. Here's what I want you to notice about these action commitments. the level of detail, the specificity. It's not just conduct a key account review, but it's also develop a plan to support the at-risk relationships. Really, that's why you would do the key account review in the first place, right? It's not just create a customer satisfaction survey, it's get feedback on it from the people whose opinions matter most in these things. It's not just work on upselling scripts, but specifically work with Jeff and Julie for 20 minutes on their upselling scripts. This level of specificity is essential in creating great commitments, commitments that really move the needle and also help to create greater accountability because there's greater clarity on what specifically the individual is committing to. The second type of commitment is a small result. This is the commitment to achieve a small specific outcome. A few examples here. Advance 5 opportunities, 1 stage in the sales cycle. Interview 3 candidates for open position and make offer to the one that best meets our requirements. And finally, increase response to customer survey to 80% or higher. Like the action examples above, here you see again that same level of specificity, so important in making good commitments. And then finally, project-specific commitments. So this is when you have a longer-term project that the team is working on, and you're making commitments to move that project forward to the next necessary step or stage. Here are a few examples. Number 1, develop recruiting team charter and finalize budget with VP HR. This was a company that was trying to build out a new recruiting function in their organization. Second, develop first draft wireframe for website revamp and submit to the marketing team for feedback. Here the project being the redoing of the website. And the last example, interview final 3 software vendors and submit final recommendation to the board. This is a project to implement a new ERP solution. So 3 types of commitments, all different but all perfectly valid and consistent with the OK Commit approach. Making good high-impact commitments starts with a very simple question. What are the 1 to 2 most important things I can do this week to impact the team's performance against our objectives? The reason why this question is so effective is because of the different elements of it. And I want to just break this question down just so you can better understand why this question leads to great commitments. First, the focus on 1 to 2 things. When making commitments, we would rather you do a few things with excellence, not many things with mediocrity. The second piece of this question to highlight is the words most important. Don't waste your time. Remember, you are fighting against the whirlwind every single day. We want you to invest your best attention and effort in those commitments that will make the biggest difference. 3, the identification of I. Commitments are personal responsibilities. Yes, you're working together as a team towards these objectives and key results, but the purpose of these commitment meetings is for you to personally pledge to move the needle forward. The fourth critical component here, the term this week. Make sure that your commitments can be completed within the coming week. If the commitment requires multiple weeks, then chunk it down, break it down into whatever you can do between now and the next commitment meeting, theoretically 5 to 7 days from now. And then finally, performance against our objectives. This is essential. Every commitment must be directed at moving the key results. Perhaps the number one mistake that people make when setting commitments is they set commitments that are essentially the whirlwind, their day job. So you can always check to see if in fact that commitment is a good commitment by asking, how will the achievement of that commitment move the key results? If you can't clearly connect the commitment that you're making with movement of 1 or more key results, then you probably need to rethink that commitment. So write this question down. Make sure you bring this question to every commitment meeting. What are the 1 to 2 most important things that I can do this week to impact the team's performance against our objectives? If the commitments that you're making check all these boxes, then you're doing it right. Speaking of doing it right, here are a few more commitment meeting best practices, ways to ensure that these meetings are as effective and impactful as they can possibly be. Number 1, meet at the same time and place each week. I want you to take a second right now to stop the video and decide as a team when and where are you going to meet each week for your commitment meetings. Anytime Monday is ideal, late morning, early afternoon. If Monday isn't an option, then ensure that these meetings happen on Tuesday at the latest. Again, stop the video right now, pull out your calendars, and decide as a team when and where you're going to meet. When you've done that, push play again, and we'll keep going. All right, welcome back. So now you know when and where you're going to meet. The second best practice is to arrive prepared. By arriving prepared, what I mean is don't come into that commitment meeting cold, not having given some thought to how you did against your commitments the week prior, what you learned from the exercise and the action you took last week, and what you're going to commit to doing in the week to come. If everybody arrives prepared to this meeting, then you can hit the ground running and get done in the prescribed 20 to 30 minute window. If people aren't prepared, then the meeting is going to take a lot longer and be far less productive and frankly, a lot less fun as well. The third best practice, start on time and end on time. It's all about punctuality here. Nobody wants another Monday meeting, right? Let's not kid ourselves. But what we find over and over again is that participants in this process identify these commitment meetings, especially when they're well run, particularly when they're well run, as being the most effective and impactful meeting of their entire week. Right? We want to make sure that these meetings are expertly run. So number one thing, make sure they start on time and make sure they end on time. If people aren't all in the room at the appointed time, start anyway. The fourth best practice, celebrate success and share learnings. One of the things that's great about this commitment meeting cycle is that every week you get to win. Every week you get to celebrate having achieved something that you said you were going to do. You got to celebrate that and celebrate the success of your peers as well. And then critically, as you're figuring things out throughout the process, make sure that you use these commitment meetings as an opportunity to say, here's what I learned. Let me help you avoid making the same mistake I did, or let me help to save you some time based upon the experience that I've had. The fifth best practice, refuse to let the whirlwind in. It's very tempting in these types of team meetings, especially standing meetings, to chit chat, talk about the weather, talk about the traffic, talk about the other stuff that's going on in the world around you. Don't let that happen in these meetings. Keep these meetings incredibly focused and intentional. Only talk about OKRs and commitments. The next best practice relates to virtual meetings. In many organizations that I work with, there's not an opportunity for everyone to be in the same room together every week for these commitment meetings. So they use tools like WebEx and Zoom to host virtual meetings. That's great. These can be just as effective. But one very simple best practice, if you are dialed in, make sure that your video is on. Make sure that people can see your face and hear your voice. It's just a very simple shift in the level of connection and accountability that's created, even in a virtual atmosphere. And the final best practice maps back to the expectations that you set with and for each other. And that is to hold each other unconditionally accountable. This is often one of the biggest challenges for teams when they begin this process, to create that very, very high level expectation that when you make a commitment, we expect you to keep it, and we don't care what else is happening in the world around you. For many teams, this is perhaps the hardest part of the process to embrace, and yet it's the most important. Because the whole reason we meet on a weekly basis, the whole reason that we make these commitments, is to ensure that we as a team make progress despite the whirlwind. What I've found is that great commitment meetings are characterized by radical candor. This is an idea explained by the author Kim Scott in her great book of the same name. In the book, Scott put together this very simple yet effective matrix to explain how we interact with one another and how we typically tend to communicate with one another. So here you can see on the horizontal axis you have on one side silence, on the other axis challenge directly. And on the vertical axis, on one end you have care personally, and on the other end you don't care. And so here's how the different styles of communication take place and the different types of interaction. When you don't care about somebody and you therefore remain silent even when they are doing something that's not in their best interest, Scott calls that manipulative insincerity. When you challenge somebody directly but still lack that personal care, Scott calls that obnoxious aggression. When you care personally, but because you're afraid of hurting that person's feelings, you don't say anything. Scott calls that ruinous empathy. Radical candor, on the other hand, is when you care personally, and because you care so much, you challenge them. You challenge them because you want them to get better. You want them to grow. And in order for them to do that, they need to know what they're doing and how they can make it better. What I find often in teams that are struggling to create the cadence of accountability that they aspire to, more often than not, they fall victim to ruinous empathy. We've been working together. We don't want to upset anybody. We care about them and we don't want to hurt their feelings. And therefore, it's easier just to kind of let bad behavior slide. That absolutely destroys the accountability mechanism essential to great commitment meetings. Now, because this is so common, I want to share a great example from the book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, talking about how to respond if a team member fails to achieve a commitment. Once you understand this process and keep this radically candid framework in mind, you can manage these conversations with grace and class. All right, so imagine you're in a commitment meeting, you're going around the room, everyone's reporting out, everyone is hitting the commitments that they set the week prior, and then you get to Ben. And here's what Ben says. He says, well, I had committed to connect with 5 important clients last week, but as you know, I had a major fire drill with Alpha Company that I had to drop everything and deal with. We were able to get the issues resolved, but it ate up all my free time, and before I knew it, the week was gone, and I didn't have time to reach out to the clients as I had planned. Sound familiar? I suspect so, and I guarantee you will hear something like this in the next few weeks from a colleague or teammate. In essence, what Ben is saying is that he couldn't keep his commitment because of the whirlwind. But even more damaging is the implication that he didn't have to keep his commitment because the whirlwind is so strong or so significant or so important. So if you're a manager or a team member, how do you respond in this situation? How do you set a new expectation that when we make commitments in these meetings, we are going to hold ourselves unconditionally accountable? We don't care about the whirlwind. We're still going to commit to one another that we will get done what we say we're going to get done. First things first, we demonstrate respect. We make it clear to Ben that we appreciate him and the effort that he is putting forth in the organization. Here's what that might sound like. Ben, first, you did an amazing job saving the Alpha account. Everyone understands how hard you worked and how important Alpha is to us. Thank you for everything that you did. But once we've demonstrated respect, now we want to reinforce accountability. Here's what it might sound like. I also want you to know how important your contribution is to this team. Without you, we can't reach our goal. This means that when we make a commitment, we have to find a way to fulfill it, no matter what happens during the week. And then finally, we want to encourage performance going forward. That could sound something like this. I know you want to help us follow through. Can we count on you to catch up by next week by fulfilling last week's commitments as well as the one you were planning on making this week? This is a critical and powerful question. What we're saying is we're not going to erase your commitment from last week. We're simply going to ask you to do it this week on top of whatever else you were intending to commit to going forward. Now, I want to be clear here. Even if you have this script right in front of you, it's still going to be at times hard to deliver this message. What I want to encourage you, and you can look at each other in the eyes right now, is that you'll commit to putting each other first. And by putting each other first, that means delivering the feedback that we and they need to hear. Now, it doesn't mean we can't help if in fact they are overwhelmed by the whirlwind. They've got more to do than time to do it. We can jump in there and help them to keep their commitments. We can help clear the path, make it easier for them to follow through on the things they said they were going to do. But we need to hold a hard line here. This is the secret to highly effective commitment meetings and, more importantly, to a high-performing, high-executing organization. All right, now that you understand the commitment meeting process, what it is, how it works, what a good agenda looks like, and how to use radical candor to create unconditional accountability across the team, It's time to set your first commitments. So I want you to stop the video right now and ask yourself this question. What are the one or two most important things I can do this week to impact the team's performance against our objectives? Once everyone has identified their commitments, I want you to share and record them. Recording them could simply mean putting them in an email that is then sent out to everybody on the team, or creating a structured shared document, Google spreadsheet or OneDrive document that becomes the repository for your commitments on a weekly basis. So stop the video now, make your first commitments, and then share those commitments with your teammates. Once you've done that, come back to the video and I'm going to share with you one final best practice to make it even easier to hit the commitments that you make. All right, welcome back. How do you feel about having your first commitments made? I hope you're excited. And now I want to make sure that you hit these commitments. And if there's one simple practice that will increase the probability that you do, it's this. Schedule time for your commitments on the calendar. Stop the video right now and add a couple of important things to it. Number one, make sure that commitment meeting is on the calendar. Number two, schedule some time in advance of the commitment meeting to prepare. Remember, one of the best practices for great commitment meetings is to arrive prepared. Well, let's prepare to prepare. Let's actually put time on the calendar to get ready for that commitment meeting. And then finally, I recommend putting at least 2 or 3 of these deep work blocks. Deep work meaning uninterrupted time during which you can get your commitments taken care of. The probability that you hit your commitments goes up exponentially if you proactively put time on the calendar to keep them, to follow through. All right, it's time to get to work. Thanks so much for being a part of this team training. I hope you found it useful. As always, if you have questions that have not yet been answered about commitment meetings or any other part of the OK Commit process, just email help@sandsleadership.com and we'll get back to you right away.